Welcome back, Sheffield Live TV. It is live on a Thursday night. Something a little bit different, something that will keep your way up possibly from the first few minutes of the England game this evening, and I'm never fazed by that. A choice between watching this show and the England game, I'll take that as a contest anytime. England v Slovenia. I'm off, by the way, from here to Overton Stadium to join Carlton Palmer and friends, including Ron Atkinson, David Hurst and John Sheridan, who together with a lot of football fans are watching the England game. I think they'll get more entertainment from the comments of Carlton and company watching it than maybe from the game itself, and of course it all to coincide with Carlton's new autobiography. He was on here a few weeks ago talking about it. It is what it is. It's a time of books at the moment. Bob Booker, former Sheffield United player, will be here in a fortnight talking about his recent publication. Meantime, just to carry on from part one, the remarkable story of Fred Spiksley flying over an olive grove. And we got to the point at the end of part one of talking about the new evidence that's come to light to prove that Fred actually scored a hat-trick in his second international for England against Scotland in 1893, a 5-2 victory. But in the official records of the FA, etc., he's never been credited with that hat-trick, despite lots of evidence to the contrary. We saw his teammate Billy Bassett's account about it before the break. Can you get this hat-trick historically verified? That's the challenge, isn't it?
It's going to be difficult at this moment in time with a structure that's kind of out there for us to approach the FA and for them to consider it. It seems to get offloaded onto other people making decisions, and they've got their own opinions about the hat-trick, which they're entitled to, but basically comes down to just the match reports at the moment. Getting any consideration of the people that have written accounts about the hat-trick, who were in the ground at the time, doesn't seem to work well with them. We've got Sir Frederick Wall, the Secretary of the FA. We've got Jimmy Catton, the editor of the Athletic News, the editor of the Lancashire Evening Post, and we've got Fred himself. Now we've got Billy Bassett, a player on the pitch. Looking at it, we think we've got enough. We're convinced, and I did take some convincing myself over it. But without a match report that backs it up, it's not going anywhere at this moment in time.
Now, all the match reports seem to be the same, don't they? Just tell me about those.
Well, I was thinking about this the other day. To me, because the press couldn't see the match, particularly at the end, I've got a match report that says just before the final goal was scored, the game was not visible to the press at all. Yet, strangely, they all described the last goal in exactly the same way. Wow. Almost to the word, 15 yards out, Reynolds scores.
I can tell you from experience exactly what's happened there then, and we get occasions like this in press boxes today where a number of writers are looking down at laptops. They wouldn't have had laptops in those days, but they could have been scribbling, or they're unsighted. It happens today, you're behind a pillar, you can't see in certain grounds, and one guy in the box will have got a view, and everybody else would have said, what happened there, what happened there, what? And one person will have thought and given that, and that will have been taken by everybody.
Yeah, so you've got, I don't know, 40, 50 match reports out there that all say the same thing, and that's currently what they're basing the evidence on. So, yeah, it's proving difficult, but at some point in time, because that hat-trick happened, and it was being written about soon after, like in 1896, Fred's benefit match, it was all documented about him scoring the hat-trick. So eventually enough evidence is going to build up for us to be able to prove that he did it.
What do the FA say when you speak to them?
There isn't anybody to speak to at the FA. There was a historian, and there isn't. Somebody has suggested to us that we should send it to the people who do the Sky Sports annual, which used to be the Rothmans. So I think we're going to pursue that. Can I just add just a tiny bit to what Clive was saying? The fifth goal, you see, it's important to us now, but it wasn't important at the time because England had beaten Scotland, okay? Yes. And for the Scottish reporters, the third goal was the crucial goal because they were claiming that that goal was offside. It was hit long ball from Bassett, 30 to 40 yards beyond the advancing Scottish defence, and Spikesy met it on the sort of half volley.
Yeah.
But it was claimed that he was offside. Fred was that quick, basically, that the Scottish defence was lost in his pace. And after the game, all that the reporters wanted to ask him was, or to certainly in terms of the Scottish reporters, was to say that the referee had got it wrong. And his situation was, the referee knows how quick I am, okay?
Yeah.
Spikesy lost a number of goals throughout his career because he was simply too quick for the referees and for the linesmen. And so it was the third goal that was the crucial thing, because it was the third goal which confirmed England's superiority.
How familiar this all is, and how we think that times have changed. It would be exactly the same today. If it was 5-2, the third goal to make it 3-2 would still be the one that would be dissected and debated if there was a
Of course, Spiksley,
controversy.
the book itself, whilst being about Spiksley, is really about the development of the game as a professional level. So when Fred started playing football, there was no such things as referees. There were only 2 umpires from teams. Now, it was felt that these 2 umpires were perhaps favouring their own sides, okay? So it was agreed, and it was only yesterday in 1890 that the very first game took place with the referee.
So
Gainsborough Trinity, ironically, where Fred was playing for, okay, played Lincoln City in a qualifying round in the FA Cup, okay, and they took the lines. The 2 umpires became the linesmen, and the referee came onto the pitch, okay. The argument being, and this is an argument which has proved irrefutable for since then, was that by having a neutral referee, there would be no more arguments and no more mistakes ever since. So that hasn't proved necessarily to be the case. Okay.
No, indeed. But I do hope that you get justice for Fred, you know, because there is such a lot of evidence, and journalists have been known to get things wrong, ladies and gentlemen, in press boxes, and get wrong goal scorers. I'll mention no names, but we've all done it over the years, and we've got wrong, you know, the cross coming in for the wrong player, and the worst thing you can do is get the goal scorer wrong. It sounds like the only guy that actually thought he saw this goal got it wrong, you know. So Fred Spiksley got a hat-trick, and I look forward to you achieving success on his behalf. We'll come back to more about Fred as it relates to Sheffield Wednesday and the times that he had with them from this book. I've just given a little bit of a local roundup. James Craig not with us, sadly, this week. He'll be, I think, back next week. So I'll bring you a much truncated version of what he does. But first of all, we have to congratulate Sheffield Tigers Speedway team for a magnificent achievement. Their first trophy, actually, in 15 years. They've done it in the grand manner. They've won the league. They've won the league title. And congratulations to them. This was after a narrow victory at Ipswich by 46-44. But Sheffield Tigers are triumphant. Nigel Pearson actually is a big Speedway man. He's a colleague of mine, a football reporting colleague on TalkSport. I am hoping to have Nigel on a forthcoming show to talk about his great love of Speedway. Football, I always like to take in non-league games at this time of year, especially when it's the international break, and it's non-league weekend coming up, so do support your local non-league club, whoever they happen to be, and I can attest that a non-league game is invariably very exciting. I went to one in midweek, I think partly because the players are there primarily to play for the enjoyment of the game, and it's not really that enjoyable to doggedly grind out a 0-0 draw, so they usually go for it. Certainly did in the game I saw at the Coach and Horses on Tuesday night between Sheffield FC and Lincoln United. 5-goal thriller. Sheffield came from behind to win it by 3-2. Fantastic goals in that, especially the winner from Andy Gascoigne. And congratulations to Mark Shaw, by the way. Following that game, was promoted from caretaker manager to the new permanent manager, if there is such a thing in football these days, of Sheffield FC. Mark Shaw, assisted by Chris Dolby, and also our old friend Matt Roney, who's appeared on this show. I've good to see you the other night, Matt, and you're in a sort of player coaching capacity at the moment. And it's 12 years to the day, I think, since he first played for Sheffield FC. A fantastic servant at the club, still going strong. Meantime, over at Sandygate Road, Hallam were trouncing Worsborough Bridge by 7-0. It could have been wider. It was actually 6-0 at half time. Finished 7-0 to Hallam, so well done there. And talking of goals, Stocksbridge Park Steels do nothing but score them. A 4-0 victory over Chasetown in midweek, and that astonishingly means that they've scored in 12 games this season. They've scored 32 goals, an average of nearly 3 a match. From the Premier League down to the level at which Stocksbridge play, that's the second highest goal output this season, just 3 behind Harrogate Town, who've scored 35. And I'll tell you what, it's going to persuade me on Saturday when there's no league football and I'm not actually working. I've been persuaded that I should take a first visit. Well, I went there once many years ago, but to Brackenmore. It does have another sponsored name, Look Local Stadium, I think. Brackenmore, I should go, yeah, definitely this Saturday, to see them play Atherton Collieries in the FA Trophy. So that's preliminary round game. So I'm going to go carry out my threat to go and watch Stocksbridge Park Steels and probably bring an end to their goal scoring spree in the process. You don't
Shouldn't
really want
have
me
mentioned
there.
Harrogate. They beat Badford Park Avenue on Monday.
That's your team, is it?
He's a ball. My son is a ball boy at the
Bridge. He's just off camera.
It's FA Cup, so they're playing games with Trinity in the next round.
I know they are.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, well, there's lots of local links there. That completes the truncated roundup for this week. Let's get back on. There were kind of fluctuating times for Sheffield Wednesday, but you know, Fred was their first big football hero, wasn't he?
Yes,
big football idol.
Yes, he was. He was the player who brought the crowd alive. Okay, he was the George Best of his day in a way, really, because when he got the ball, the crowd just moved up. But also, we all have players we really, really like, but sometimes on the big games they don't perform. With Spiksley, the big games was when he was absolutely at his best. So there'd been a couple of cup ties. There was nothing bigger than the FA Cup, and there was nothing bigger than the FA Cup until basically into the 1950s, in fairness, the big occasion. So he destroyed Derby on one occasion, and then the biggest team in the country came in 1894 to Olive Grove, Aston Villa, and Villa were much the better side on the day. And with a few minutes to go, Spiksley scored the equaliser, and the game went to extra time, and he created the winner, and that was known as Spikesley's match.
Yeah.
Okay, they didn't go on to win the FA Cup that year, but a couple of years down the line, he scores, was it 4 goals, 8 assists as Wednesday win the Cup. They opened the town hall. What's the thing on the top of the town hall called?
Vulcan. Yeah.
That's known for the next 40 years as Fred. Basically, that's known for 40 years as Fred. As simple as that. It was the same time. So even when you looked around the town, Fred was there.
The reason being is he's got his hand up, hasn't he? And it's Fred appealing for a foul, apparently, because he was kicked to death all the time.
It sounded like you read the book. I mean, it was nothing more or less than assault on him.
But he played the big games. He played them fantastically well. So at Gainsborough, he played the big games well. Yeah. Gainsborough won the Midland League. That was more or less like the 4th tier. So this was the peak of Gainsborough playing. Here, he took Wednesday to the Cup, and as you've seen in some of the things, so for example, Ambrose Langley, who was the enforcer for Fred and for the team, he said afterwards they should have put a statue up to Fred, okay? They were a good side, but nothing special.
It's not too late, by the way.
Well, we've got some plans.
Too late.
We have some plans. We've got a number of ongoing ideas which we want to see developed. Firstly, we just the last couple of days we noticed somebody's trying to get up a plaque to Arthur Wharton, for example, at Rotherham where he played, and we think that should be supported.
The first black player in English
so
football.
We think that should be supported, and but we've got some other ideas. Our ambition is we want to now get a room with photographs and the images that you've got, Fred's room. There's been some thought about a beer, but as he didn't drink, we think that would be a poor move.
That's strange him not drinking, isn't it? That's a very odd thing. I don't know. Mind you, I noticed around the time that football clubs used to boast that their players were, what was the word?
He was a supreme athlete. He was a supreme athlete.
There was the 1890s footballers that some of them saw it as almost like a scientific approach, which got lost a little bit after, I feel, and so he was very much into being healthy, and his coaching ideas as well were quite advanced. He was the first person to use sort of like stop motion or slow motion film to demonstrate skills.
He was ahead of his time. Absolutely.
Well, the other thing is he didn't live in Sheffield because he didn't like the air.
He didn't like the industrial smog,
industrial crime. Because don't forget, he was going to die. His first contract for Sheffield Wednesday, they weren't sure whether to give him a second one because he was due to die in his second season.
Yes, because he
had consumption.
Had consumption, which was a total killer then. How he survived that?
Basically, in the moment that happened, he got the contract. He got the 3-year contract. He went back to Gainsborough for the fresh air, but also he could go gambling there as well. So he could go out to the horse racing.
What about, before we come on to the royal visit, what about the FA Cup final goal for Sheffield Wednesday in 20 seconds? I don't think that's historically, I think it's various...
We're not going to manage that.
No, it was around 20 seconds.
I think we accept that the match reports that say sort of like 20 seconds, there's one that says like 15. They're not stopwatch times, but the FA have looked at it. David Barber looked at it before he left, and he was like, this could be it, but we can't prove it. So they've not kind of dismissed that one. It was a very, very quick goal, and it's in a sense got a little bit lost because the one in the final before in 1895, the Aston Villa scored one in a very similar time, and that one is officially acknowledged as being quicker than Fred's.
So
we definitely think that Fred's was quicker than Bob Chatts or whoever it was, or Debbie, whoever scored for Villa. We think there's a good chance it was quicker than Louis Sahar's, but we're not. And that was 25 seconds. We think there's a very good chance of that, but we do accept that. We certainly
never going to.
We're not going. We don't. The referee's report doesn't exist, and the rest of it. If you look at the actual report where they report every part and things, we think it's entirely possible that it was under 25 seconds.
Right, whatever.
We think it's entirely possible.
It's remarkable. He won the FA Cup with Wednesday. They didn't win the league until the year that he left, did they? 1903, wasn't it?
He left in 04 because he had a crippling injury in training in 1903. But yes, they won. Wednesday won the league 03, and interestingly, again, when you're talking about the big games, Wednesday had to win that game. Okay. Sunderland still had another game, and it was generally accepted that Sunderland would win that other game because they were only playing Newcastle, and so it was generally felt that Newcastle would let them win that game. Okay, so it was 2-1, and West Brom were already relegated. It's one of the great joys of English football that a team which is already relegated still didn't roll over, still wanted to compete, still wanted to win the game, and they were really putting Wednesday under a lot of pressure at the new Hillsborough, and the ball was broken away, taken by Spiksley, and you probably know what next. It ended in the back of the net. They won 3-1, and in fact, Newcastle, sadly, because I'm a Sunderland fan, fluked the game, and Sheffield Wednesday were down in Plymouth, and they're doing that. Fred, on his way home, in his last full game against Aberford, either scored 2 or 3 goals.
Right. One sec. Until I read your book, I'd never heard of the Duke of Teck, but he was a member of the royal family, and obviously everybody knew him. around this period. And what you've discovered, and we're going to look at some evidence of your discovery coming up, that the Duke of Teck, who you're going to see on screen shortly, couldn't be with us tonight. There he is in his regalia. They're rather impressive uniform that he had. He turned up at Olive Grove. Now we're talking. I'm just trying to think from my notes.
November 1892.
1892 in November. Yeah. And the reason you know that he turned up is because of this article. There's another picture of Fred. Looking splendid there at the football match. Now you think this appeared in either the Sheffield Telegraph or the Sheffield Independent newspaper.
Yeah, it was sent to me recently by someone who's been helping me put together an Olive Grove scrapbook that's going to be presented to people who are attending our event at Hillsborough in November. And he's emailed me this, which was quite interesting because Duke of Teck was at Richmond only a few months later,
That's witnessing
the hat-trick. So we were unaware of that he would actually have been watching football before then and gone to Olive Grove. Obviously was impressed with it. I think he watched the second half, and Sheffield Wednesday won, beat Bolton 4-2, with Fred scoring 2 of the goals.
And he left. He said the party left. The party left amid cheering. His Highness admitting before quitting the stand that it was a splendid match. Yeah. As he probably would do. But I mean, it's amazing that obviously well reported at the time. But
we've been very lucky. We've been very lucky with the photographs and lots of the research. Many people have been good enough to send us the information.
Yeah.
And whilst obviously the vast majority of the book is the work which the graph we've put in and the information and things, the extra little touches and stuff which turn it from being like a good into sort of something a bit better than that. We're being fortunate because people have been extremely generous.
Yeah. With the photographs, with the information.
And the information, and they've been very generous, it's been excellent.
You've pieced it all together. Obviously, we've only got less than 2 minutes left, but he worked on stage with Charlie Chaplin in something called the Fred Carno Company. It was
Custard Pie joke.
Yeah.
Mr. Custard Pie.
He was a prisoner of war in the First World War, and he went abroad as a coach and a manager, and he won several times.
He escaped.
Several countries.
He escaped. He was never a prisoner of war. He was put in, there were going odd things, and he manages to escape. Just briefly before we close, we've still got a handful of tickets left for the 11th of November event at the stadium at Hillsborough. And so if people want to find out more about that, we've got our site, spiksley.com. There's going to be an unrivaled selection of memorabilia on display, medals, caps, badges. Clive's done a fantastic job. The programme, which is of Olive Grove with the photographs and the images and the rest of them, he's done a fantastic job.
That's all
it's
included.
Brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant.
It's been mesmerising listening to you.
Brilliant.
And thank you very much.
Oh, no, thanks for having us. It's been, we've enjoyed
wonderful,
doing it.
Wonderful entertainment. This show, as ever, is repeated at 11 p.m. tonight. If you missed it, it's well worth a catch up. Or you can see it on my YouTube channel. I'll be tweeting links to it during the course of the evening while I shoot off to join Carlton Palmer and co at Overton Stadium. Meantime, it just remains for me to thank 2 of the authors of Flying Over an Olive Grove, the story of this legendary footballer, Mark Metcalf and Clive Nicholson.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Great to catch up. Great to talk to you. And in particular, my grateful thanks to Fred Spiksley. Good on you. Next time you can come in. See you next week. Bye.
Nice one. Well done.